Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to break down everything you, as a nonprofit leader, really need to know about charitable solicitation registration in the state of Washington. This explainer is part of our multi-state fundraising compliance series where we aim to make these complex regulatory topics really clear and practical. And it's all brought to you by Ironwood Registrations. Okay, let's just dive right into the single most important rule you need to remember. If your nonprofit is planning to ask for donations in Washington, you absolutely have to register with the state before you start. Not after, not during, but before. Honestly, this is the key takeaway that shapes everything else we're about to talk about. So, to make sure we cover all the bases, we'll walk through the registration basics. Then we'll get into the initial filing process, talk about the rules for annual renewals, cover who might be exempt, and finally, we'll wrap up with a handy checklist for staying compliant. First up, let's lay the groundwork. We'll look at who makes the rules and what activities actually fall under their watch. The main player here is the Washington Secretary of State, and more specifically, their Charities program. They're the ones overseeing all fundraising activities and keeping a public list of every charity that's good to go in the state. So, what does solicitation actually mean in their eyes? Well, it's a really broad definition. It includes that Donate Now button on your website, all your email blasts and social media asks, the classic direct mail letters, phone calls, and even in-person fundraising events you might hold in the state. Pretty much, if you're asking for money, it's gonna count. And who has to play by these rules? Well, it's not just for nonprofits that have an office in Seattle. Of course, if you're based in Washington and fundraising, you need to register. But here's the kicker. If you're based anywhere else, but you're asking Washington residents for donations, you also have to register. The key is where the donor is, not where your office is located. All right, now that we've figured out who needs to register, let's walk through the actual steps for getting that initial filing done. In Washington, the initial registration is all done online. So before you start, you're gonna wanna gather a few key things. Your IRS determination letter, an up-to-date list of your officers and directors, and if you're working with any professional fundraisers, copies of those contracts. And to make it official, make sure it's signed by a president or treasurer. The standard fee for this initial filing is $60. It's just a necessary step to get your organization properly on the books with the state. You know, getting registered is really just the beginning. To keep your good standing, you have to renew every year. And this is where Washington's rules get particularly interesting, especially when we talk about deadlines. Okay, so Washington has this unique two-tier deadline system. The standard due date is 4.5 months after your fiscal year ends. But, and this is great, the state gives you an automatic 6.5-month extension. That gives you a final deadline of a full 11 months after your fiscal year closes. Now, this is a critical detail, and it trips a lot of people up. Washington works on a receipt-based deadline. What that means is your filing has to be physically in their hands by the due date. Just postmarking it on the deadline day is not good enough. You've got to plan ahead to make sure it actually arrives on time. The fee for this annual renewal is $40, so it's a little less than that initial registration. And what happens if your filing isn't received by that final deadline? The state will charge a $50 late fee. It's a penalty that's really easy to avoid with just a little bit of planning. Of course, not every single organization needs to jump through these hoops. So let's take a look at which nonprofits might actually be exempt from these requirements. The most common exemption has two parts, and they are both very strict. First, your organization has to raise less than $50,000 in a year. And second, it has to be run entirely by unpaid volunteers. If you have even one paid staff member, you won't qualify for this exemption, no matter how little you raise. Both have to be true. There are a few other groups that are generally exempt automatically. This typically includes most religious organizations, political organizations, and any fundraising appeals that are for a specific named person. Here's a question we get all the time from organizations based outside of Washington. The answer is simple: no. You don't need a separate registered agent in the state. By registering to fundraise, you automatically designate the Secretary of State as your agent for any legal notices. Okay, we have definitely covered a lot of ground. So let's pull all of that together into a simple checklist that can help you stay on the right side of things. Let's just recap those 4 crucial steps to stay compliant. Number 1, register before you ask for a single penny. 2. Know your fiscal year end and put that 11-month final deadline on your calendar. 3. Be ready to submit your filings and financial info every single year. And 4. Keep an eye on your status. If you grow past that $50,000 mark or hire your first employee, you might lose your exemption and need to register. You know, it really helps to remember the why behind all these rules. This isn't just about paperwork for the sake of paperwork. It's about building trust. Washington's laws are designed to promote transparency and give donors confidence that their contributions are being handled responsibly. Staying on top of Washington's registration and reporting requirements is just essential for uninterrupted fundraising. If your organization needs some help managing compliance, whether it's in Washington or across multiple states, Ironwood Registrations is a firm that specializes in exactly this process. You can learn more over at ironwoodregistrations.com.